They found the letter 3 years after he died. Sarah Mitchell had avoided her father's study since the funeral, couldn't bear to touch his desk, his books, the American flag folded in that perfect triangle sitting on the mantel of their Denver home. But the bank was foreclosing, and her mother had already left for Phoenix with a man she met at grief counseling, so Sarah had no choice but to pack up the memories alone. She was 26 now, working double shifts at a diner off I-25, her nursing degree abandoned when the life insurance money never came through, something about circumstances under review that the military rep wouldn't explain. The study smelled like leather and Old Spice, exactly as she remembered, and for a moment she was 15 again, doing homework while Dad typed his reports, both of them comfortable in silence. The letter was tucked inside his copy of The Things They Carried, sealed in an envelope with her name written in his careful handwriting. But the ink was different, shaky, desperate, nothing like the steady script she knew. Her hands trembled as she opened it, and the first line made her knees buckle. "Sarah, if you're reading this, then I've failed, and you need to know the truth about what we did in Kandahar." The pages detailed everything. How his unit had been ordered to secure a compound, how they'd found something they weren't supposed to find, rooms full of documents that proved American contractors were funding both sides of the conflict, washing money through construction projects that never got built, while soldiers like him died protecting the lie. He wrote about the colonel who discovered their discovery, about the midnight meeting in the desert, about how 3 men in his unit who'd seen the evidence started dying in accidents. Lopez's Humvee hit an IED on a route they'd cleared twice. Jenkins shot himself with his own rifle, even though he was left-handed and the wound was on the right side. Williams overdosed on pills he'd never been prescribed. Her father wrote that he'd made copies, hidden them, sent them to someone he trusted, but he knew they were coming for him too, knew that his death would look like enemy fire, but wouldn't be. Knew that they'd make sure his family got nothing so Sarah and her mother would be too busy surviving to ask questions. "I'm sorry I won't be there to walk you down the aisle, to meet my grandchildren, to grow old with your mother," he wrote, "but I couldn't stay silent while men died for corporate profit and call myself your father." He gave her a name, Marcus Webb, a journalist in Washington, D.C., and an address, told her Webb had everything, told her to be careful, told her he loved her more than his own life. Sarah sat on that floor for an hour, crying and raging, the letter clutched against her chest, understanding finally why the military had dragged their feet, why Mom had gotten weird phone calls that made her jumpy, why their house had been broken into twice with nothing stolen. She called the number her father had written, but it was disconnected, so she searched Marcus Webb online and found an obituary from 2 years ago. Car accident on a rainy night in Georgetown, left the road and hit a tree. Police said alcohol was involved, though friends insisted he never drank. Dead ends everywhere, just like they'd planned. But Sarah couldn't let it go. Spent her tips on a bus ticket to D.C., found Webb's widow living in a tiny apartment in Silver Spring, and when Sarah showed her the letter, the old woman's face went pale. "He told me someone might come," Mrs. Webb whispered, disappearing into a bedroom and returning with a shoebox full of flash drives, copies of documents, photographs of pages that proved everything, the money trails, the falsified reports, the names of everyone involved, from contractors to congressmen. Marcus was going to publish it, she said, tears streaming, but they got to him first, and I was too scared, too old. I couldn't fight them alone. Sarah took the box, took copies of everything, and spent 6 months working with 3 different journalists before finding one brave enough or crazy enough to run the story. A woman named Rachel Chen at an independent outlet who'd already been investigating defense contractor fraud. The article exploded across the internet, got picked up by major networks, sparked congressional investigations, resulted in 14 indictments, including a 2-star general and the CEO of the 3rd largest defense contractor in America. Sarah testified before Congress, her father's letter projected on screens behind her, and she watched men in expensive suits squirm as she read his words aloud, watched them try to discredit a dead soldier who'd loved his country enough to die telling the truth.
The military finally released the life insurance, issued a formal apology, awarded her father a posthumous commendation for integrity that felt hollow and decades too late. But Sarah didn't do it for medals or money. She did it because her father trusted her to finish what he started, because Lopez and Jenkins and Williams and Marcus Webb deserved more than unmarked graves and official lies, because she learned that sometimes the most patriotic thing you can do is refuse to let your country's sins stay buried. The case settled 3 years later for an amount her lawyer said she couldn't disclose, but it was enough to pay off the house, finish her nursing degree, and start a foundation in her father's name that helped veterans and their families navigate the bureaucratic nightmares of the VA system. She never married, never had those grandchildren her father had mentioned, but she kept his flag on her mantle and his letter in a safety deposit box, and every Veterans Day she visited Arlington National Cemetery, even though he was buried in Denver, standing among the white headstones and wondering how many other families got letters they'd never opened, how many truths were still hidden in desk drawers and storage units, waiting for someone brave enough to read them. On the 10th anniversary of his death, Sarah published a book, part memoir, part investigation, dedicated to the soldiers who fought enemies both foreign and domestic, and it spent 16 weeks on the bestseller list, sparked a documentary, inspired 2 congressional bills aimed at contractor oversight and whistleblower protection. She testified before Congress, her father's letter projected on screens behind her, and she watched men in expensive suits squirm as she read his words aloud, watched them try to discredit a dead soldier who'd loved his country enough to die telling the truth. The military finally released the life insurance, issued a formal apology, awarded her father a posthumous commendation for integrity that felt hollow and decades too late. But Sarah didn't do it for medals or money. She did it because her father trusted her to finish what he started, because Lopez and Jenkins and Williams and Marcus Webb deserved more than unmarked graves and official lies, because she learned that sometimes the most patriotic thing you can do is refuse to let your country's sins stay buried. The last page of his letter had contained just one sentence, separate from the rest, underlined 3 times. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing, and you, my darling girl, have never been good at doing nothing. She'd spent her whole life trying to make him proud, never knowing that the truest test of his faith in her would come from beyond the grave, written in shaky handwriting on pages that waited 3 years in darkness to change everything.